Isn't it just like direct mail, but with an E? Welcome to All About Email. Our speakers today are Harry Lynch and Paul Habig. Harry Lynch is the CEO of Sankey Communications. Since joining the direct marketing industry in 1980, Harry has worked in every aspect of the field, from production manager to list expert, and he is also a leader of the SCI creative team, which has been honored 9 times with industry awards. Harry is the vice president of the Greater New York chapter of AFP and vice chair of the Association of Direct Response Fundraising Council. Harry is also the vice chair of AFP International. Paul Habig is currently serving as the executive vice president of Sankey Net. He joined Sankey Net in 2001 and has more than a dozen years of internet marketing and fundraising experience. He has developed multifaceted online strategies for more than 50 nonprofit organizations. Paul is active in the Greater New York chapter of AFP as well and serves as the chair of the website for Fundraising Day in New York. Paul also serves as a board member for the Direct Marketing and Fundraising Association.
I hope we get applause at the end. That'll be what counts, but thank you. And very nice to see you all this afternoon. Paul and I actually first gave this session or a version of it in New York City 2.5 years ago. And I have to say I found it actually pretty fascinating to pull out my notes a couple of weeks ago and look at what we were, and this is just 2.5 years ago, but to look at what we were talking about and what we were thinking about then. A razor with 3G internet, unlimited texting, and I really felt cool. And I actually became very intrigued with the idea of text messaging and what that might mean for our industry. We were then looking into the technology for nonprofits to use text messaging, to use it for fundraising. None of our clients are really that interested in it. At that point, it seemed like something a little far-fetched. I think there were a few groups that had done some tests that seemed to work well. But the other thing a lot of people were talking about then were Apple had come out with something, by the way, called an iPhone. So we had a sense that might catch on, but it wasn't really completely clear then. So I also felt like I was a really cool, I think I was 48 or 49, pretty cool 49-year-old because I had a Facebook page. And I was being friended or friending my nieces and nephews and little cousins and keeping up with them that way. And I was one of, I think, I don't know if you remember the statistic, but I think it was something like 22% of people over 40 were on Facebook at that point in time. So I was definitely on the cutting edge. And how many of you actually, to be honest, how many of you had Facebook pages that long ago? So you're an advanced group, clearly. So I'm not surprised. But at that point, I mean, we were certainly excited by the potential for social media for fundraising and communications for nonprofits. I think the statistic that year was that the Facebook Causes application, which is only a piece of it, but an important piece, had raised about $1.2 million. So a really pretty tiny fraction of 1% of the overall amount of money donated online at that point, which that year was, I think, $9 billion was donated online. And the workhorse of online fundraising 2.5 years ago was email. And it was a very exciting time for email. There had been a survey just prior to our session that showed that more than half of Americans older than 65 were now using email, and something like 3/4 of Americans over 50. So our best donor groups, the kind of up-and-coming donors, they were on email, they were on it in a big way. I hadn't seen a kind of definitive survey of the amount of money that was being raised via email then, but our own sense, our own estimates that it was probably about 1/4 of the total, so something like $2.25 billion a year versus what was coming, say, the 1.2 million via Facebook at that point, and kind of negligible amounts. I mean, email is the second, or was the second most significant source of online income at that point in time. Can you guess what the most significant one? Online income, what brings in the most money online? Email is the second, or was the second most significant source of online income at that point in time. Can you guess what the most significant one? Online income. What brings in the most money online? The first response was your website, and that is the correct response. There's a lot of focus on the tools that we use, and I think we all know that we need to focus on our websites themselves. But fast forward now to 2010. So I have an iPhone in my other pocket, and I imagine quite a few of you have pretty advanced smartphones at this point, and your BlackBerries. And I think just about everybody just wants to only talk about giving via text. That's been the big topic since the Haiti earthquake and the relief efforts, and it's a very exciting time to see that medium coming into its own. Social media, obviously, if people aren't talking about text-based fundraising, they're talking about social media and all the uses of Facebook and Twitter, and the numbers have increased exponentially, what's being raised online via social media, and it's become a very important part of our online fundraising arsenal. And I think Nikki Noble's in the room. She's one of the experts, and I know she may have a number. I think I'd seen over $100 million, how significant it's become. And you know, we're all watching the trends. It's a high majority of people over 65 now are using email. The fastest growing group going online and primarily using email are Americans 70 to 74. And obviously a very high majority of people over 50 and you know, kind of in every age group. So email, it's there, it's extremely significant. One of the reasons, it's not just the demographic trends, one of the reasons it's doing so much better and it's so significant is because we're all using the tool better. And we've all been learning best practices and we've all been applying them more. And my history is in traditional direct mail. And one of the things that has always been so striking to me is how extraordinarily similar in certain ways email as a fundraising tool is to traditional direct mail. I mean, it's really astounding in so many ways. And yet, I'm also stunned at how very, very profoundly different in a couple of ways email is, and how risky it can be to assume that email is just like traditional direct mail. So to get into our presentation now, I mean, we've framed the presentation in terms of 7 tried and true principles of direct mail fundraising, kind of 7 adages. And we're going to go through them one by one and talk about how email is similar and what best practices from traditional direct mail that you probably know apply, and the ways in which it's different, and how you need to be thinking differently and constructing your program differently. So adage number 1, principle number 1, you can never mail too much. Now, if you're working in traditional direct mail, I mean, you can mail 8, 10, 12, some groups 20 or more times a year to their donor base. And for the most part, frequency really does work well. People, the more you mail, usually the more you'll gross. People do respond. If they don't like what you've sent or they don't like the frequency, most of the time they'll throw what you sent in the garbage. And you basically have the opportunity to go back to them again in a month, in 6 weeks, whatever your cycle is, and try again and hope that you capture their attention better and kind of reach them on a better day. And it couldn't be more different in terms of using email. And this is really one of the areas in which it's most different. Like what you've sent or they don't like the frequency, most of the time they'll throw what you sent in the garbage. And you basically have the opportunity to go back to them again in a month, in 6 weeks, whatever your cycle is, and try again and hope that you capture their attention better and kind of reach them on a better day. And it couldn't be more different in terms of using email. And this is really one of the areas in which it's most different. The temptation for so many groups is to blast away at this point. I mean, the email is so inexpensive to use, and the tools are more accessible than ever. So many groups are just, we see groups mailing weekly, mailing every couple of days. We see some organizations mailing every day. And it's like, well, what's the harm? We have this wonderful, inexpensive tool at our disposal. And the harm is pretty dramatic, the potential harm, and it's very distinctly measurable also. that if you over email, your open rates will decline and your opt-out rates will surge. And you can watch this happening and you can see it happening. And one of the profound differences between traditional direct mail and email is once somebody opts out, legally you can't go back to them again. You've lost them forever. It's not like direct mail where if they throw it away, you can go back again. If they opt out, which is very, very easy to do, just the click of a button, that's it, the relationship's over. So this is certainly an area to focus on. And Paul's going to take you through what we've learned as far as the kind of best practices for frequency and timing.
Thanks, Harry. So major differences between email and direct mail. One is that we look at email as a cultivation tool versus just purely a fundraising tool. With direct mail, pretty much every time you send a mailing out, you're going to ask for a direct solicitation because of the cost. But with email, you really do want to have that frequency be cultivation and stewardship and a balance of both. So here's an example of, this is the Smithsonian Focus, but that gives their members and donors clear information about their museums and programs, and this goes out on a monthly basis. We often get a question of how much email should I be sending, and that answer varies between organization. Every group has a different answer. You know, some groups can sustain a monthly email. Some groups can sustain a weekly email, maybe an advocacy group or a health organization that is giving out information or tips. Each organization is different, but they cannot sustain fundraising appeal after fundraising appeal. So you really want to have pieces like this going out in between other pieces. This particular one is the Covenant House Beacon, which is a monthly newsletter, leads with a human interest story, but then also has other different cultivation pieces in there. As you can see for this particular example, it says, join us our Christmas Mass in New York City, and really trying to engage people. So there's also an opportunity for people to have a non-fundraising action. But within these pieces, you always have a soft ask. And to the right, you can see you can help. You can identify a group of people on your email file that are similar to direct mail, those multi-donors. So you do want to give that group an opportunity, but you don't want it to be front and center and have it be a solicitation every time. Because as Harry mentioned, the worst thing we can have is that you have huge amounts of opt-outs, or the opposite is that your list becomes unproductive. Some people don't end up opting out, but they just stop. They stop actually looking at the emails, and then we'll notice that the click-through rate goes down. Their email might be viewed. The open rate still might happen, but we'll see the click and conversion slowly fall down after a series of emails.